Good evening. This is our fourth and final session for today, for tonight, or for today, for those of you who are in Europe or in the West. The whole summit is far from over. We just started today and we still have 3 days to go to complete this summit. So just a few reminders, the venue doesn't close until the end of the summit, which means you can use the venue to network with other participants or to network with your friends or colleagues who are attending with you in this summit. And you can also take the time outside the sessions to visit the booths. We will be adding more booths after today's session. So let's proceed with this Q&A. Please feel free to ask the questions live by raising your hand. There's a raise hand button on the upper right. Once you raise your hand and we see it, we will hand you the microphone. So you can choose to turn off your videos, but please keep your mics on. Okay, so let's start the discussion. So as we wait for the live questions, let's just go through some of the questions from the previous sessions that have not been answered yet. So for session 1, this is for Philip. Can risk be projected, and at what stage of the project implementation the risk analysis can be done?
Yeah, projected, yes, because I showed you in the presentation, it's important to include the uncertainty. That means using distributions and the range. You should select the range according to your knowledge, to information that's available. So in the early stages, you have quite a larger range. And the more information you actually gather of the project, the smaller the range will be. So it doesn't matter when you start the risk management. I recommend start it very early, because the uncertainty is very, very high in early phases, of course. And the approach helps you to just actually depict the uncertainty according to your knowledge, as I said. Is the question answered, or is there any follow-up?
There was another question, and that was, where is the software available from? Does it run all around the world and can be applied across the globe on every different kind of project?
Okay. Yes, it's available, and it's used by quite a lot of agencies around the world. So if you want, I can post a link to the website, so you can make yourself a picture. At the target at the feed, or where should I post the link?
You can post at the feed, or
Okay.
or at the question and answers round, wherever you feel like. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you, Philip. The next question is for Peter from EN, I would say. So the question is, what's the difference between milestone payment versus progress payment? In what way does a contractor bill their accomplishment each month if they haven't reached yet the milestone completion, in case you use the milestone payment method? Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, so the milestone payment implementation is really mainly based around specific types of projects. So really where projects are very fast track in nature, so where you're going to be progressing through a program at pace, is really where they have true benefit. Because it places, it cuts the bureaucracy actually of applying for and approving payments and actually releasing money. So it gives greater certainty to cash flows for suppliers. The key is identifying it early and in collaboration with the supply chain. So, and defining what it means. So, really putting some definition around what that milestone completion might look like. And it would look different depending on where you are in the project. So it could be linked to the approval of detailed design, for example. That's a nice, firm milestone that can be achieved and defined. It could be linked to permitting approval. And the weighting of these milestones, so the actual percentage of the payment of the contract sum that you're breaking down into that milestone, you collaboratively agree what that percentage will be with your supply chain before you embark on the project. And that's really the benefit of it. In longer projects and longer programs, the traditional claim for payment based on progress is the norm. But particularly in the event world, in the event industry, where programs and completion dates are absolutely sacrosanct, it's very good to have these payment milestones identified very, very early in the project delivery process.
Oh, thank you, Peter. There is another question. I think you answered it when we were doing the session, and it's again about that have these projects of mega in nature incurred project cost overruns and delay on delivery. So when you talk about this supply chain and the procurement and have an international collaboration, there might happen that the delays occur due to the untimely delivery of the prefabricated, for example, objects on site. So how should we manage that kind of issue?
So I think the international nature of the supply chains, shouldn't really be a cause for delayed programs and cost overruns. The basic principles apply of engaging with the supply chain early, clearly understanding what they can do well, what they can't do not so well, documenting that and getting that defined in the project plan, and in the tender documents and properly defined in contracts. So I would say that the international nature of projects shouldn't be used as a reason for this. Philip touched on a great point in the answer to his question slightly earlier, which is, what knowledge do you have of the project that you're delivering at that moment in time? And really, if it's an untested scope, so depending on how innovative the package is that you're delivering or how innovative the project is, the risk is greater because there's less information out there that you can use to put into your project plan, which inherently makes risk larger until you can close that gap of actually testing information and before you put it into the project plan. So that, I would say, is probably the biggest contributory reason to overspend on any project, or things taking longer.
Thank you, Peter. Brian, do we have another question?
Yeah.
Or I would like to, yeah.
Yeah, I think we left one question for Nick unanswered. Are there lessons learned from the school project on how to run a project collaboratively while school operations is progressing, which could be applied to the current pandemic challenges of homeschooling, working, and being fair to all?
Yeah, this is a very interesting point because there's huge debate around the world now, isn't there, about online teaching and that kind of thing. So back to my client actually there, who I still do some work for. So they did a survey just before the end of last year about homeschooling and also what they call blended learning, which is now, as I mentioned, I think half of the pupils go to school 1 week, and then the other half go the week after. So basically, the blended learning is 1 week of online teaching, and the next week you're actually at campus. And what was very interesting is that over 90% of parents and pupils prefer being actually at school. Now, that may not be a big surprise to many people, but on the other hand, it does give some kind of justification for having schools, and also the benefit of the pupils being together and learning together in their peer group. So in other words, with people of their own age rather than sitting at home in front of a screen all day. So I think there are a lot of lessons that can be learned, if you like, about the importance of schooling, of being at a campus, and learning. And what the school have done is they've put in place something called Bring Your Own Device, which is basically each student is encouraged to bring their own computer or tablet with them to school so that they can learn online and they're familiar with how their machine works and, you know, how their tablet works or their Mac or whatever it might be. And so I think, you know, for the future, I personally see this as a big opportunity to encourage learning, because what we know about online learning is it can be more personal. So for those pupils who are maybe a little bit behind with their teaching, they can be given schooling to catch up, you know, without feeling embarrassed or feeling that they can't actually ask for help. So we didn't envisage this kind of thing when we redeveloped the school. But actually, a lot of the buildings that were put in place with basically new technology, because these buildings are now only 2, 3, 4 years old. So they're all wired for sound, if you like. It was a very, very good thing to do, because I think with the old historic buildings that I showed you on the slide, they wouldn't have been able to do a lot of this online stuff. They just didn't have the, you know, capacity to do it. But they've got the best internet and Wi-Fi and that kind of thing that country can provide, which is actually very good. So they've been able to use their new facilities, even though the pandemic has gone on. They've been able to use at least their facilities for most of their kids.
Thank you, Nick. I have a question for Philip. So Philip, as you said, like you determine what will be the impact of the risk on the overruns or the whole progress of the project. So how important is that the schedule that you receive from the client is accurate?
Yeah, good question, Hargit. The schedule is never accurate. This will never be. That's fact. Yeah. The thing is I would say build up a schedule that is useful for your project management, risk management approach. And I would say, I mentioned it before, it should be condensed. It means really at the stage, at a level that you can still read. You see the dependencies, connections, activities, the important ones, and all the milestones which are important. So I give you maybe an idea. So we always, try to condense even large projects with more than 10,000 activities down to 100, 150 items. And that's always possible. Yeah. And this is now the base to make even the project management understand again what's happening in their project. It's sometimes very interesting. Yeah. To see the first time a schedule in the project, they understand. And then it's easier to handle with the risk, of course, and connect them as I have showed you in the presentation. But again, Argit is never accurate. Never, of course not. Yeah.
I agree. Although I am responsible for preparing schedules for my projects, but I would agree, yes, we cannot be 100% sure that they will be 100% accurate. Just a following question for you. So the risks that you determine or that you use as a factor for determining the progress of your project, sometimes the risks just happen instantaneously on site. For example, an accident or something similar situation. Can your software or your methodology also help to show the impact of that kind of instantaneous risk on the project cost or delays?
I would answer it like it's the way how you build up the model. It's not the software itself, or like the approach you're choosing to link everything together. If you focus on some kind of it's like accidents on the side, of course, you know, integrate them, you will see the impact if it happens, of course. Yeah. So important is maybe one point is that we always look into the future from our point of view, so that all the past in the cost control system, of course, that's done, so that's fact. But we're gonna try to predict from our current status into the future, and of course, depends on the deep impact. It's the potential impact.
Thank you, Philip.
Yeah, there's one more question, Philip. I think we haven't answered this. there's a comment, really interesting and thorough method to estimate the real budget and the schedule for the client. My question is where the data is coming from and the quality of the input. As always, the output is only as good as the input. So,
perfect question. Very good. You will receive the same at the other end. I give an example maybe. So sometimes we start the process when the owner of a big project is not really sure that the costs are good, and he doesn't trust the estimate. And as you know, when you have an estimate, there's sometimes a lot of hidden markups in there. There's no really differentiation between the base cost, the risk escalation. Sometimes it's all mixed up. Yeah. And this is something that makes a project not controllable when you go into construction phase. So it takes quite a time and effort for the first run. So just give you two examples. At the Hamburg Metro program, we started last March, and it took us now to February, I will say, to finish the first model. Why is it so, I would say, so intense? Because you have to put together the teams for the risk workshops. It's quite a big job, Yeah, go through every item, see that base costs are naked. There's no markups in there. It's just a BIM model, as I said. This should be transferred 1-to-1 to our base cost. Risk teams. You have to choose the SMEs you want to actually. Invite Federate to run it years. And also we invited some colleagues of Peter from Turner and Townsend to be SMEs in our risk workshops, And it took also half a year to go through all the cost again, to set up the workshops, invite international experts, to get the best results for our model input.
Thank you, Philip. I have a following question, but to Peter. So I think you both can answer simultaneously. So Peter, of the beginning, so you as a project manager, how would you support this idea, and what kind of data do you think is quite important, or the transparency in the project that's quite important for Philip to determine the risks for the project?
Yeah, no, so it depends on the kind of project really, and that's really really the starting point. So yeah. Has the project been has a version of this project been done before? Has and utilizing lessons learned from any other precedent. The challenge comes is when it's something which is so innovative. Every project is different, but some projects are more different than others. I would say, and the example I talked about in the presentation, the 3D printed office in Dubai. That was really one of the most challenging projects, even though one of the smallest in area. Really one of the most challenging because of the untested nature of it. So that would be my answer to that.
okay. Before I ask my question, we encourage the audience to also ask your questions so that we know exactly what you'd like to learn from from our experts here. So please feel free to type them in the Q&A or raise your hands for a live question. So my question is for both Philip and Peter. Peter has a direct experience in managing a project. I mean the 3D printed office, and the beauty of this 3D printed office is that it turns construction somehow, at least an aspect of it, into something that is similar to manufacturing. And at least for that 3D, for the structural and architectural part where you actually print it, it simplifies your supply chain in that specific part. So do you think that further taking this construction industry or construction methodology into something similar to manufacturing will minimize risk, or will it minimize risks at certain areas, but it will give rise to other risks? What do you think about this? How do we, how does that methodology help us mitigate our risks?
So from a delivery perspective, it really improves the mitigation of risk. I mean, the 3D printed building that I was involved in was very, very early on in the development of the technology, and we really stopped probably quite a long way off the actual reaching the potential of what we could actually do. The more information that you have and you put into the 3D model that the 3D printer will be printing from, the better. And you can be identifying risers of engineering can then be replicated. So not only mitigating the risk of aborted work on site, and all that kind of thing. So trades not being coordinated and that kind of thing. You're mitigating that by defining it early, putting the interdisciplinary information into the model. The 3D printer prints the information that you've put in, and you put the model. Onto site, and you're using, as well.
Oh, thank you, Peter. So we have the next question for Peter. Could you mute yourself, please, so we don't have the echo problems? Yeah. So the next question is for Dr. Philip. How do you think this pandemic will affect the future of project management in terms of managing risks? Will this be a permanent factor in how professionals manage a project, or the pre-pandemic model is safe to use in this new normal? Wonderful question.
Yeah, it's a good one. Let me start with this. So my experience is that when the pandemic started almost a year ago, many of the project managers from big projects used that occasion to reassess their programs. Actually, interesting fact. Yeah, because there was some change now. As I said, like a game changer. Now they had the chance to really do everything new, redo everything. Actually, and get out of the trap from the cost, maybe from the budget they had before. Yeah, that's a positive effect, I would say, from the pandemic. On the other hand, of course, the pre-pandemic models, are not valid anymore. Yeah, of course not, because it's a big shifter and we have delay. But I have to say, like the big tunnels in Austria here, we are actually working for two, the Brenner-based tunnels, for example, the Cohen-based tunnel. They're still under production. Yeah, so they had a short break, but after this, everything was going back to normal. And maybe one small a sentence on de-escalation I was talking about today. we have an increase of reinforcement steel in Austria over the last weeks of 45%. So that's an effect of pandemic, of course. Yeah. And you see that, again, that red to the green curve in my presentation, that gap will be a bit higher and larger than we actually had it a year ago.
Thank you, Philip. We have another question from Christina Stolz. So it appears the time and cost to achieve a truthful model is certainly justified on mega projects. Is there a perfect range, good range, or maybe a not relevant range of project scale to use the model and software on to make it efficient?
Yes, Christina, thank you. I very often get that question. The two ways to answer it. First point is, of course, there's some kind of, I would say, some size of the project, and when the effort is some kind of justified to do. I give 2 examples. New York City, the state of New York City, actually has $100 million, to do that probabilistic risk analysis for each mega project they have. The same in euros, 100 million euros is done in Germany from the Ministry of Transportation for bigger, larger projects. But this is just for the large organizations. I think I would answer the question with, it's the relevance of the project. So imagine you're a small city or a small whatever village, and in the Alps here, for example, right behind me, and you're building a small hydropower plant just for your own use, maybe $30 million or euros, It's a small project for maybe a big company, but it's that important project for you in your lifetime for your city, yeah. And of course, because it's that relevant and the public perception is that high, you might use more sophisticated methods for the assessment than maybe a big company would do for the same size of the project.
Okay. Thank you, Philip, for that. I think we missed out one question, and this is from architect Jocelyn Rivera Lutap. By the way, she's the dean of the largest delegation of students in this summit. So she's the dean of the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, College of Architecture and Design and Built Environment. So her question is for Peter. So she just wants to know what's the status of the World Expo Dubai.
Hi, thank you for the question. The status is it's opening its doors to the world on the 1st of October 2021, and it will be open until the end of March 2022. The majority of construction is complete, and I think they've actually opened a phase of it actually this weekend to the public, so they can come in and enjoy a portion of the site being fully operational. So we're all looking forward to the 1st of October 2021 and seeing the whole site open and the event kicking off in earnest.
Okay, thank you. There's another question from Marisher de la Cruz. How can one mitigate the current risk being experienced by the ongoing projects prior to the occurrence of the pandemic? I think she didn't say who it is for, but it can be for anyone.
It's an open question. Feel free to answer.
So I'll read it again. How can one mitigate the current risk being experienced by the ongoing project prior to the occurrence of the pandemic?
Okay. So from my perspective, the projects that are in better shape prior to the pandemic have been able to maintain the best progress. So where capital expenditure has been committed, and where there's real ambition to drive through to the next kind of milestone of completion, and the project is in good shape. And what I mean by good shape is it's within budget. There's no issues that have been encountered. Then that's really the kind of the differentiator. The projects that are in good shape. The difficulty in some of the projects that have been live during the pandemic is when they weren't planned particularly. They didn't have the meticulous planning or the agility to adapt to the changing market conditions. So that would be my answer to
that. Philip, thank you, Peter. First of all, Philip, would you like to add something? And also followed by Nick.
I hope I understand the question right, but if yes, I would say that of course we have a new baseline after the pandemic for every project. So there's something that occurred and changed the project, And of course, there's a new baseline now, and we have to include now the new situation and also the risk we have assessed before the pandemic, adapting them to the new situation. And over to
I just want to add, and I've kind of said it before, but I think that there's a big opportunity for the good project managers who can get their head around what the pandemic means and go to the client and the team and say, actually, this is how we can manage this particular project. So I think that we all need to put our thinking caps on. I know we have done that, actually, and some of the innovations that have come forward have been very good. But I think we need to talk to the clients and say to them, actually, we can help you. Okay, there has been some delay or, whatever it might be, or you might need to change this because of this. But I think those project managers who are proactive will actually do well out of this.
Thank you, Nick. We have the last question from Eleni, and she says it's an open question to all of you. What good PM practices have you seen being implemented as a response to the pandemic in your corner of the world that you would like to recommend to the rest of us? So I guess all of you work in different parts of the world. So I would like to start with Nick, if you would like to take the mic.
Yeah, so I'm just going to pick up on a human thing, actually, which is that in the Middle East in particular, a lot of the workforce were housed in substandard conditions, a lot, big camps, for example, of people. And these, when the pandemic started, were often very difficult to manage, and a lot of people got the virus because of it. So there's been a big move to improve workers' conditions, rights, standards, the food they eat, the cleanliness, the washing facilities, and so on, and also on site, of course. So that has happened. The stuff on site has happened pretty much throughout the world, but certainly workers' camps in the various countries that I've done quite a lot of work in have been required to improve their standards. And I think that is absolutely to be applauded. And it's a long time coming, but thank heavens it started to come.
Okay, so there's Dean Rivera says, thank you, Dr. Day, for the update. We are excited to join the expo. So hopefully that will be international travel will be allowed by that time. So we are looking forward to it as well. So I have a question, which because in today's session, what were really, I think the 2 points that we are really looking at are relationships and risks as they pertain to project delivery. So which one do we address first? The risks or the relationships? It looks like a chicken and egg. Right? I mean, we set up a collaborative environment. Do we set up the collaborative environment first, or do we even before we try to mitigate the risks? I mean, so what is it? What do you think?
So I'll have a go first. So for me, I would set up the team and the collaboration and the way that the collaboration is going to work. Because actually that team, if you then sit down and say, right, what are the risks? You've actually got a group of people there who can work together, and you can come up with a risk register, or you employ Philip's company to whatever it may be. But there's no way that one person or one group of professionals can work out all the risks in a site. It's impossible. So I remember when I was running a big project in the Middle East, I had to go to London to get the thing insured, to get the project insured. And we actually had a workshop with the whole team to figure out what it was we needed to be insured and what kind of questions we might be asked about the risks that project had whilst I was trying to get it insured. And, the insurance quote for that project actually was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So, for me, I think the collaboration comes first, but I also believe that risk needs to be considered, like in most businesses, right at the very beginning. And one of the problems historically is that it wasn't considered right at the very beginning. It was considered somewhere down the line, and that wasn't good enough. But I think best practice now is certainly to put risk on the agenda right early on in any kind of project.
I would add something, Brian. Okay, thank you, Eric. Yes, I think both points linked to transparency. So I also see that you need a good, actually assembled team to do the risk analysis, of course. And what we usually do before we start, we have some kind of team alignment workshops. We really align the team, integrate the experts from outside, or subject matter experts, etc., and then go start with risk assessments. So the team goes first in this case.
Thank you, Philip. Peter, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I would agree with both Nick and Philip. I mean, collaboration and people are really at the heart of success, to be honest with you. And I think a point that Nick raised in his presentation, project management being about the bridge, the bridge between different entities and different people and different organizations. And I think, that bridge is collaboration and it is people. And I think, I think it ultimately, I think it comes from that. I think success in anything comes from that.
Maybe I can add a quote very quickly. I had a PM from Canada, one of the last project, and he always said, Philip, what the key is for a successful project is you have to deal with the GDP. I said, what's GDP? I said, it's the goddamn people. Yeah. And that's what it's all about, Yeah.
I guess you're right in that one. Well, if I recall correctly, I forgot the quote from Steve Jobs. He said once that the effective, I quite don't remember, but something was for an effective business is cannot be accomplished by a single person. So we definitely need alliance, whether it's construction or any kind of business. Even to run a household, for example, we need an alliance between all the members. So I think this is one of the lessons that we learned today. But however, I think somehow we agree that alliance is quite important, collaboration is quite important to deal with the challenges of the project. But somehow when we go back to the day-to-day life in our own projects, we see there is a lot of discrepancy between the members. So it's a bit difficult and challenging to align the motivation of all the project planners and consultants to achieve what we want to achieve. So I think this is in my opinion, this is one lesson that we should take back home today and try to implement it in our construction projects. So Brian, do we have more questions? I think we have another one. Could you read that, please? Yeah.
Sir's client usually cannot, it's an open question. Sir's clients usually cannot foresee risks like we in AECO. I would like to ask how we can better include risk management in our contracts that we AECO stakeholders find fair for everybody involved without sounding like overrated for clients. Anyone can
I think it's a bit complicated question. Maybe I would like to translate it to decrease the complexity. I think it's like how we understand risks is quite different than how our clients understand risks, because for them, risk means cost overruns and more importantly, time delays if they have some investment from banks or there's some other stakeholders involved. So I think the question was how we make it fair for everybody, or how do we add it in our contracts so that we don't run out of options at the end. I hope I translated properly. If not, please feel free to write it again. So who would like to give the answer first? I think everybody's confused.
I can try. Also, yes, let's try. Also, I think of course, the owner has a different perspective than maybe the consultant, or of course, the contractor, of course. Yeah. So what we need also to do a proper project management, also risk management, is an educated owner. So the owner has also to know what to apply, what his project needs. If it's, as I said, pure budget driven, you won't achieve your aims, your goals. Actually, that's a problem. So the owner has to make sure that he's educated, and also find the right ways to implement his project management. And there's another quote I can actually say is also David, my PM from Canada, said, the owner is his own worst enemy, in some projects. So that's maybe the background from him, and he worked his whole life on the owner side.
So I used to use a couple of things, actually. I used to say, very early on in my career, I used to say, right, the risk. So you're building a house, okay? It's pretty easy to work out above the ground how much a house is going to cost to build, right? Because you've got some plans, there's a kitchen, it's a certain size, there's a certain number of toilets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're talking to the client, and the client says, yeah, I understand that. So I say, actually, the problem we have is what's below the ground. We don't actually know. Unless we dig a great big hole the size of the house, we can't possibly know everything oh yeah, I understand that now. Yeah, I get that. And I use that very simple thing to try and, like Philip is saying, to educate the client that actually we can't possibly know everything. It's not possible to know everything. So therefore there is going to be a risk. I found that's kind of helped. So yeah, the educated client is to try to help him is a very interesting. It's a challenge, actually, because when I got to the Middle East, I discovered that quite often the client would say, I've got the design. Here's my lovely design. I've got my contractor. He's a lovely chap. I've known him forever. I've agreed a price of $3 million to build this building, and I'll see you in a year when it's finished. And that doesn't work either. So you have to say, to the client, actually, I expect, I really want to come and see you, preferably once a week or something, or can you come to the site and let's talk about, what's actually going on here. And actually, once you start to spread that kind of message, the client then becomes more interested. And you can, I always used to say to him, because we might think of some great ideas where we can save some money or improve the quality or do this or do that, but I'm going to need you to help me. I can't do it on my own. So don't just come back in a year and expect it to be finished. Let's keep the discussion going, And that's another way of, I suppose, mitigating the risk is to have your client fully on board with you.
Okay. I think I'll share, my thoughts on this. I think this is where contracting forms and project delivery methods really matter, because we have to explore, like I think it was in Nick's presentation, we have to explore newer models like alliancing, and it has to be reflected on our contracts. If you're familiar with the integrated project delivery methods, wherein we really have to state there that risks and rewards have to be shared by all parties, because if one, rather our risk, I think one of the attitudes that we should have about risk is that we just delegate risk to the best party who can solve it, right? But no single party in that team can actually do it completely without the help of the team. So we have to look into that model wherein all parties are aware of the limitations and knowing all the risks. I don't think there is a single entity that can identify all the risks that we will get into. We can exercise due diligence, we can do all those workshops. But the truth of the matter is we cannot remove risks totally. And and coming from another from the World Project Management Forum, I think there were even presenters there saying that we should not even aim to remove the risks, because the uncertainties should be allowed to enhance project experience, enhance the project. So it's really about getting an alignment of the minds and say, hey, nobody can know all of this ahead of time. So we just agree to share the risk, share the rewards, and share the losses if there will be any.
I think that was all with the questions for today. We have received a thank you. As we're talking about risks, and we should try to tackle them. I think there was a quotation from Mr. Sorry, today's something wrong with me. Mr. Benjamin Graham. Sorry, and he said that successful investing is in managing risks and not avoiding it. So this is another lesson that we take from today, that rather than trying to avoid the risks, be prepared to manage them properly. So once again, thank you very much, all of you, to become a part of this summit. I would say thank you very much to the speakers and also the participants. We tried to make it very interactive, and that was the whole intent of this summit. So I will give the mic to Brian so we can end the session.
Okay. So once again, this is just the first day of the summit, and we are very privileged to have Nick, Philip, and Peter to share their experiences. And I'm sure they were. I'm very confident that we can all learn from this, adapt them accordingly to our respective practices, and we also encourage you to share whatever you've learned in your experience, in your practice, and do the same thing. Share it. Let's have a collaborative mindset. Let's not just think of the industry as something that is disconnected. We have to think globally as one construction industry, and this is what the aim. This is one of the aims of this summit. So once again, thank you for all our speakers. Thank you also for my co-host Hargit, and thank you for all of you for attending tonight's session. Now, in the coming weeks, we will actually um, issue certificates of attendances based on the performance report of the platform. So if we see that it's been reported that you have spent at least you have finished it, spent more than half of the time attending this, then we will issue those certificates of attendance. And we are still actually accepting registrants to the summit. So even if we have started today, I mean, the registration will not close until the start of the last day. So I hope you can tell your friends about the summit, and invite them, lead them to our pages so that we can assist them in securing a slot for the remaining days. So that's it for tonight, and thank you once again. We'll see you next week. That's January 23rd.
23rd, yes.
23rd at 9 a.m. That's Central European Time, and that's 4 p.m. Philippine Standard Time. Okay, so thank you very much. This has been a productive day, and we look forward to seeing all of you again to next week's summit. Thank you, and good night.